Man who, after a dry lifetime spent at home, in college, learning law and parish talk, was flooded with passion, unaware his whole provinced and complacent past drowned out from him that moment as he stood in Florence, where he had come to spend a month and not the secret of Da Vinci's reign, he musing somewhat absently perhaps some English question whether men should pay the unpopular but necessary tax with left or right hand in alien sun, in the great pleasure of the Santimasa, they drifted past him, scarcely marked enough to move his comfortable island scorn. A train of priestly banners, cross and psalm, the white-veiled rose, crowned maidens holding up tall papers, weighty for such rest aslant to the blue luminous tremor of the air, and letting drop the white wax, white letting drop the white wax as they went to eat the bishop's wafer at the church, from which long tail of chanting priest and girls, a face flushed like a symbol on his face, and look with silent clangor, brain and heart transfiguring him to music. Thus, even thus, he too received his sacramental gift with Eucharistic meanings, for he loved, and thus loved, she died. I have heard it said that but to see him in the first surprise of widower and father nursing me, unmothered little child of 4 years old, his large man's hand afraid to touch my curls, as if the gold would tarnish his grave lips, conjuring such miserable smile, as if he knew needs must us or I should die, and yet 'twas hard would almost keep the stones cry out for pity. There is a verse he said is Santa Claus to her memory, weep for an infant too young to weep much, when death removed his mother. Stop the mirth today on women faces when they talk, with rosy children hanging on their gowns under the cloister to escape the sun. What scorches in the Pisa, after which he left out our Florence and made haste to hide himself, his prattling child, a silent grief, among the mountains above Piligo, because unmothered babes he thought had need of mother nature more than others use. A Pan's white coast and ears warm and full of mystic contemplation come to feed poor mislike milkless lips of orphan like his own. Such scholars scraps he talk, I have heard from friends, from even prosaic man to wear grief long will get to wear it head aside, with a flower stuck in it. Father then and child, we lived among the mountains many years. God silenced the outside of the house, and we, who did not speak too loud within, and old Asanta to make up the fire, crossing herself whenever sudden flame which lighted from the firewood made alive that picture of the mother on the wall. The painter drew it after she was dead, and when the face was finished, throat and hands, her chimeras carried him in hate of the English fashion shroud and the last brocade she dressed in at the pity he should paint no sadder thing than that she swore to wrong her poor Signora. Therefore, very strange the effect was. I, a little child, would couch for hours upon the floor, with knees drawn up, the gaze across them, half in terror, half in adoration at the picture there, that swung like supernatural white life, just sailing upward from the red, stiff silk, which seemed to have no part in it, no power to keep it from the quiet breaking out of bounds. For hours I sat and stared. Asunta's and my poor father's melancholy eyes still pointed that way. That way went my thoughts. When wandering beyond sight, as I grew in years, I mixed, confused unconsciously whatever I last read or heard or dreamed, abhorrent, admirable, beautiful, pathetical, gastical, grotesque. I still, with face which did not therefore change, but kept the mystic levels of all forms and fears and admiration, was by turn ghost, fiend, angel, fairy, witch, sprite, a dauntless muse whose eyes are dreadful fate, a loving psyche who loses sight of love, a still Medusa, and still milky brows, all curdled and all clothed upon that with snakes, whose slime falls fast as sweet will, or anon Our Lady of the Passion stabbed with the swords, where the babe stalked, or Lamina in her first moonlighted pallor, ere her shrunk and blinked, and shuddering bricked, wriggled down to the unclean, or my own mother, leaving her last smile in her last kiss upon the baby mouth. My father pushed down the bed for that, or my dead mother without smile or kiss, buried at Florence, all which images concentrated on the picture glass themselves before my meditative childhood as the incoherencies of change and death are presented fully mixed, merged in the smooth, fair mystery of perpetual life. And I, while I stayed away my childhood's wits upon my mother's picture, a poor child. My father, who through love had suddenly thrown off the old conventions, broken loose from chin bands of the souls like Lazarus, yet had no time to learn to talk and walk or grow anew familiar with sin, who had reached to freedom, not to action, but lived as one entranced with thoughts, not aims, with love that unmade from a common man, but not completed to an uncommon man. My father taught me what he had learned the best before he died, and left me grief and love, and seeing we had books among the hills, strong words of counseling souls, confederate with vocal pines and waters out of book, he taught me all the ignorance of man, and how God laughs in heaven when any man says, Here I am learned, this I understand, in that I'm never caught at fault or doubt. He sent the school to school, demonstrating a fool will pass for such thorough one mistake, while a philosopher will pass for such. Through sad mistake being ventured in the gross and leaped up to system. I'm like, they tell me, my dear father, broader brows, howbeit upon a slenderer undergrowth of delicate feature, paler near as grave. But then my mother's smile break up in the whole and makes it better sometimes than itself. So full so 9 full years our days were hid with God among his mountains. I was just 13, still growing like a plant from unseen roots, in tongue, tight springs, and suddenly awoke to full life and its needs and agonies. With an intense, strong, struggling heart, behind a stone dead father, life struck sharp on death, makes awful lightning. His words was, Love, love, my child, love, love. Then he had done with grief, Love, my child. Ere I answered, he was gone, and none was left to love in all the world. There ended childhood. Was what succeeded next I recollect as, after fevers man thread back the passage of delirium, missing the turnstile, baffled by the door, smooth endless days, notched here and there with knives, a weary, wormy darkness, spurred I flank with flame, what that it should eat and end itself, like some tormented scorpion. Then at last I do remember clearly how there came a strange with authority, not right, I thought not, who commanded, caught me up with old Asunta's neck, how with a shriek she let me go, while I with tears too full of my father's silence to shrink back a word. In all a child's astonishment at grief stared at the wharf where she stood and mourned. My poor Asanta, she stood and mourned. The white walls, the blue hills, my Italy, drawn backward from the shuddering steamer deck, like one in anger, ended drawing her back, which suppliants catch it. Then the bitter sea, inexorably pushed beyond between us both, and sweeping us the ship with the despair, threw us out as the passengers to the stars. 10 nights and days we voyaged on the deep 10 nights and days without the command phrase of any day or night, the moon, the sun, cut off from the green reconciling earth to starve into the blind ferocity and glare unnatural the very sky, dropping its bell net down upon the sea as if no human heart should escape alive, bed raged with the desolating salt, until it seemed no more than holy heaven to which my father went, all new, strange the universe turned, stranger for a child, then land, then England, oh the frosty cliffs, looked cold upon me. I could find a home among those mean red houses through a fog, and when I heard my father's language first from alien lips which had no kiss for mine, I wept aloud, then laughed, then wept, and someone near me said the child was a mad through much sea sickness. The drain swept on us was my father's England, the great isle. The ground seemed cut off from the fellowship or the verdure, field from field, as a man from a man. The skies themselves looked low and positive, as almost you could touch them with a hand, and dared to do it. They were so far off and got celestial crystals, all things blurred and dull and vague. Shakespeare and his mates did Shakespeare and his mate with heart to strive a radiant color up, or active outline the indifferent air? I think I see my father's sister stand upon the hall step of her country house to give me welcome. She stood straight and calm, her somewhat narrow forehead braided tight, as if for taming accidental thoughts from possible pulses, brown hair pricked with grey by frigid use of life. She was not old, although my father's elder by a year, a nose drawn sharply yet in delicate lines, a close, wild mouth a little showered about the ends through speaking antiquated loves or pre-adventure niggardly half-truths, eyes of no color. Once they might have smiled, but never have forgotten themselves in smiling cheeks, in which was yet a rose of parish summers, like a rose in a bud, kept more for ruth than pleasure, if past blossom, past fading also. She had lived, we'll say, a harmless life she called a virtuous life, a quiet life which was not life at all, but that she had not lived enough to know. Between the vicar and the county squires, the Lord Lieutenant looking down sometimes from the imperial to assure their souls against chance vulgarisms, and in the abyss, and the apothecary looked once on a year to prove their soundness of humility. The poor club exercised her Christian gifts of knitting stocking, stitching petticoats, because we are of all one flesh after all, and need one flannel, with a proper sense of difference in the quality. And still, the book club, guarded from your modern trick of shaking dangerous caution from the crease, perished her intellectual. She had lived a sort of cage, bird cage, born in a cage, accounting that to leap from the perch to perch was act and joy enough for any bird. Dear heaven, how silly are the things that live in thickets and eat berries. I, alas, a wild bird scarcely fledged was brought to her cage, and she was there to meet me, very kind, bring the cleaner water, get out the fresh sheets. She stood upon the steps to welcome me, calm in black garb. I clinched about her neck. Young babes who'd catch at every shred of wool to draw the new light closer, catch and cling less blindly in my ears my father's word, hum ignorantly as the sea in cells. Love, love, my child. She, black there, my grief, might feel my love. She was his sister's once. I clung to her a moment. She seemed moved, kissed me with cold lips, suffered me to cling, and drew me feebly through the hall into the room sat in. There, with some strange spasm of pain and passion, she wrung loose my hands imperiously and held me at arm's length, and with two grey, steel naked bladed eyes searched through my face and stabbed it through and through brows and cheeks and chins, as if to find a wicked murderer in my innocent face, if not here, there perhaps. Then, drawing breath, she struggled for an ordinary calm and missed it rather, told me not to shrink, as if she had told me not to lie or swear. She loved my mother, she loved my father, and would love me too, as long as I deserve it. Very kind. I understood her meaning afterward. She thought to find my mother in my face and questioned it for that. For she, my aunt, had loved my father truly, as she could, and hated with the girl of gentle souls my Tuscan mother, who had fooled away a wise man from wise courses, a good man from obvious duties, and depriving her, his sister, of the household precedence, had wronged his tenants, robbed his native land, and made him mad alike the life and death, in love and sorrow. She had vowed for years what sort of women could be suitable to her sort of hate, to entertain it with, and so very curiosity became hate too, and all the idealism she ever used in life was used for hate, till hate so nourished, so exceed at last the love from which it grew, its strength and heat, and wrinkled her smooth conscience with a sense of disputable virtue, say not sin, when Christian doctrine was enforced at church, and thus my father's sister was to me my mother's hater. For from the day she did her duty to me, I appreciate it in her own word as spoken to herself, her duty in large measure well pressed out, but measured always. She was generous, bland, more courteous than was tender, gave me still the first place, as it fearful God's saints would look down suddenly and say, herein you missed a point, I think through lack of love. Alas, a mother never is afraid of speaking angrily to any child, since love, she knows, is justified of love. And I was a good child on the whole, a meek and manageable child. Why not? I did not live to have the faults of life. There seemed more true life in my father's grave than in all England, since that threw me off, who fain would cleave. His latest will, they say, consigns me to this land. I only thought of lying sweet there, where I was thrown like a seaweed on the rocks, and suffer her to prick me a pattern with her pen, fiber and fiber, delicate leaf from leaf, dry out from the drowned anatomy, and last see, salt left in me. So it was. I broke the copious curls upon my head in braids, because she liked smooth ordered hair. I left off saying by sweet Tuscan words, which still was my stirring of the heart, come up to float across the English phrase as lilies, because she liked my father's child to speak his tongue. I learned the collects and the catechism, the creeds from Athenius back to Nice, the articles, the tracts against the time, by no means on a white sprig of love, and various popular synopses of inhuman doctrines never taught by John, because she liked instructed piety. I learned by compliment of French, of classic French, kept pure of Balzac and neologism, and German also, since she liked a range of liberal education tongues, not bugs. I learnt a little algebra, a little of the mathematics, brushed with extreme flaunts the circle of the sciences, because she misliked women who are frivolous. I learnt the royal journalism of Ovidio and the internal laws of the Burmese Empire, of how many feet Mount Kimbrazo or stars Himalaya, what navigate rivers joins itself to Lara, what census of year 5 was taken at Klagenfurt, because she She liked a general insight into usual facts. I learned much music, such as would have been as quite impossible in Johnson's day. As still it might be wished, fine sleights of hand and unimagined fingering shoved off the hearer's soul through hurricanes of notes to a noisy trumpet, and I drew customs from French engravings, narratives neatly draped with smokes of simmering godship. I watched in from nature landscape, rather say washed out. I danced the polka and clarius spun glass, stuffed birds, the model flowers in the wax. Because she liked accomplishment in girls, I read a score of books on a womanhood to prove if a woman do not think at all, they may teach thinking to a maiden aunt, or else the author, books of demonstrating their right of comprehending husband's talk when not too deep, and even of answering with pretty maid way, or so it is. Their rapid insight and fine aptitude, particular worth and general missionaries, and long as they keep quiet by the fire and never say no when the word says a. For what is fatal, their angelic reach of virtue chiefly used to sit and dine and the flattened household sinners, their in brief potential faculty in everything of abducting power in it. She owned she liked a woman to be womanly, an English woman. She thanked God and sighed. Some people always sigh in thanking God, were models to the universe, and last I learnt cross stitch because she did not like to see me wear the night with the empty hands. Doing nothing by shepherdess was something after all, and the pastoral saints be praised for it. Leaning lower lawn with pink eyes to match her shoes, when I mistook the scales, her head uncrushed, by what round weight of head so strangely similar to the tortoise shell which slew the tragic poet. By the way, the works of the women are symbolical. We shoe prick our fingers, dull our sights, producing what a pair of slippers, sir, to put it on when you are weary, or a stool to tumble upon and vex you, crush the stool, or else at best a cushion where you lean and sleep and dream of something we are not, but would be like our sake. Alas, alas, this hurts most. This, after all, we are paid the worth of our work, perhaps in looking down. These years of education to return, I wonder if Brinweiler suffered more in the water torture, flood succeeding flood, to drench the incapable throat and split the wings, than I did. Certain of your feebler souls get out in such process. Many pine to a sick, indoors light. My own endured. I had relations in the unseen, and drew the elemental nutriment and heat from the nature as earth feels the suns at night, or as a babe sucks surely in the dark. I kept the life trust on me on the outside of the inner life, with all its ample room from heart and lungs for will and intellect, inviolable by conventions. God, thank thee for the grace of thine. At first, I felt no life which was not patient, did the things she bade me, without heed to a thing beyond it, stayed in just a chair she placed with a back against the window to exclude the sight of the great lime tree on the lawn, which seemed to have some of on pressure purpose from the words to bring the house a message, and walked demurely in the carpeted low rooms, as if I should, hearkening my own steps, misdoubt I was alive. I read her books, was civil to her cousin Leigh, gave ear to her vicar, tea to her visitors, and heard them whisper when I changed a cup. I, I blushed for a joy at that the Italian child, for all her eyes and her quiet ways, thrives ill in England. She is paler yet than when she came the last time. She will die. Will die, my cousin Leigh blushed too, with sudden anger, and approaching me, said low between his teeth, "We are wicked now. You wish to die and leave a world a desk for others with your naughty light blown out. I looked into his face defyingly. He might have known that being what I was, 'twas natural to like to get away, as far as a dead folk can, and then indeed some people make no trouble when they die. He turned and went abruptly, slammed the door, and shut the dog out. Romney lay. I have not named my cousin here hitherto, and yet I used him as a sort of friend, my elder by few years, but cold and shy and absent tender when he thought of it, which scarcely was imperative, grave betimes, as well as early master of Leigh Hall, whereof the nightmare sate upon his youth, repressing all its seasonable delights, and agonizing with the ghastly sense of universal hideous want and wrong to incriminate possession. When he came from college to the country, very oft he crossed the hills on visits to my aunt, with gifts of blue grapes from the hothouses, a book in one hand, mere statistics, if I chanced to lift the cover, count of all the gods whose beards were sprouting down toward hell, against God's separating judgment hour, and she almost loved him, even allowed that sometimes he should seem to shy my way. I made him easier to be pitiful, and shying was his gift. So undisturbed at while she let him shut my music up and push my needles down and lead me out to see that south angle of the house, and the figs grow black as if the Tuscan trog. On some light pretext, she would turn her head at other moments, go to fetch a thing, and leave me breath enough to speak with him. For this sake it was simple sometimes too. He would have saved me utterly, it seemed. He stood and looked so. Once he stood so near, he dropped a sudden hand upon my head, bent down on a woman's work, as soft as a rain, and then I rose and shook it off as fire, the stranger's touch that looked my father's place, yet dared seemed soft. I used him for a friend before I ever knew him for a friend. 'Twas better. 'Twas worse also. Afterward we came too close. We saw our differences too intimately. Always Romney was looking for the worms, I for the gods. The godlike nature has, the godlike look down, incurious of themselves, and suddenly 'tis well I should remember how those days I was wont to, and he looked on me, a little by his act perhaps, yet more by something in me, surely not my will. I did not die by slowly as in soon to whom life creeps back in the form of death, with a sense of separation, a blind pain of blank obstruction, and a roar. I the ears of visionary chariots with retreat as earth grows clearer, slowly by degrees I walk, rose up. Where was I in the world for uses? Therefore I must count worthwhile. I had a little chamber in the house, as green as a privet hedge. A bird might choose a build in, though the nest itself could show the dead brown brick sticks and drawers. The walls were green, and the carpet was pure green, and the straight small bed was curtained greenly, and the folds hung green out the window, which let in the outdoor world with all its greenery. You could not push your head out to escape a dash of drowned dew from the honeysuckle, but as so were baptized into the grace and privilege of the seeing. First the lime, I had enough there of the lime, be sure, by morning dream was often hummed away by the bees in it. Pastime, the lawn which, after sweeping broadly round the house, went trickling through the shrubberies in the stream of tender drought, and wore and lost itself among the acacias, over which you saw the irregular line of elms by the deep lane, which stopped the ground and dammed the overflow of arbutus and the laurel out of the sight. The lane was sunk so deep, no foreign tramp nor drover of wild ponies out of the field could guess if a lady hall or a tenant lodge dispensed such orders through his stick. Well, Crooked might reach the lowest trail of the blossoming briar, which dipped upon the wall behind the elms and through their tops, and saw the folded hills stripped up and down, and hedges barely oaks projecting from the lines to sow themselves, through which my cousin Romney's chimney smoked as little as still when silent mouth in the frost breaths, showing where the woodlands of the hid lay a hole, while for above a just of tableland, a promontory without water stretched. You could not catch it if the days were thick, or did it for a cloud, but otherwise the vigorous sun would catch it up at eve, and when it for the uneven, till he had filled the shells of heaven with burning thunderbolts, and proved he need not rest so early. Then, when all his sitting trouble was resolved, toward trends of passion glory you might see in partitions on the golden sky. Alas, my goiter's background, the sheep ran along the fine clear outline, small as mice, as run along the wet scarlet thread, not a grand nature, not my chestnut wounds of Velumrosa cleaving by the spunks to the precipice, not my headlong leaps of water that cry out for joy or fear in leaping through the palpitating pines like a white soul tossed out to eternity with thrills of time upon it. Not indeed my multitudinous mountains sitting in the magic circle with mutual touch, electric panting from their full deep hearts beneath the influent heavens and waiting for communion and commission. Italy is one thing, England one, on the English ground. You understand the latter, ere the fall. How Adam lived in the garden, all the fields are tied up the fast with hedges, nosegay like. The hills are crumpled plains, the plains, the parterres, the trees, the trees around woolly, ready to be clipped, and if seek for any wilderness, you find at best a park, a nature tamed and grown domestic like a barn door fowl, which does not awe you just as it close and bleaks, not tempt you to an eyrie too high up, but which in crackling setting you thinking of your eggs tomorrow at breakfast. In the pause of finer meditation, rather say a sweet familiar nature stealing in the dog might, or a child to touch your hand or pluck your gown and humbly mind you so of presence and affection excellent from inner uses from the things without. I could not be unthankful. I was untreated thus and holpen. In the room I speak, ere the house was well awake, and also after it was well asleep, I sat alone and drew the blessing in all the nature with a gradual step, a stir among the leaves, a breath, a ray. It came in swift and softly, while the angels made a place for it. Beside me the moon came and swept my chamber clean of foolish thought. The sun came, saying, shall I lift this light against the lime tree, and you will not look. I make the birds sing, listen but for you. God never hears your voice, expecting when you lie upon the bed at nights and weeps. Then sometimes moved me, then awakened up more slowly than I verily right now, but wholly. At last I wakened, opened wide, and the window and my soul, and let the airs, the outdoor sights, sweep gradual gospels in, regenerating what I was of life. How oft We throw it off and think, enough, enough of life in so much. Here is a cause for a rupture, herein we must break with life, or be ourselves unworthy. Here are the wronged, maimed, spoiled for aspiration, farewell life, and so forward, babes. Babes, we hide our eyes and think all ended. Then life calls to us in some transformed apo- apocryphal new voice above us or below us or around. Perhaps we call it nature's voice or love's trickling ourselves because we are more ashamed. So on our compensations than griefs. Still, life is a voice. Still, we make our peace with life. So young then, was not sullen. Soon I used to get up early just to sit and watch the morning quicken in the grey and hear the silence open like a flower, leaf after leaf struck with listless hand and the woodbine through the window, till at last I came to do it for a sort of love, a foolish unaware, whereat I smile a melancholy smile to catch myself smiling for joy. Capacity for joy admits temptation. It seemed next worthwhile to dodge the sharp sword set against my life, to slip down the stairs through all the sleepy house, as mute as any dream there, and escape as a soul from the body out of the door, glide through the shrubberies, drop into the lane, and wander on the hills of an hour or two, and then back before the house should stir. Or else I sat on in my chamber green, and I lived my life and thought my thoughts and prayed my prayers without the vicar, read my books without considering whether they were fit to me do good. Mark there, we get no good by being ungenerous even to a book, and calculating profits. So much help by so much reading. It is rather when we gloriously forget ourselves and plunge soul forward headlong into a book profound, impassioned for its beauty and salt of truth. It is when we get the right good from a book. I read much what my father taught before from many a volume. Love re-emphasized upon the self. Same pages. Theophrast grew tender with the memory of his eyes, and Eileen made mine wet. The trick of Greek and Latin he had taught me, as he would have taught me wrestling or the game of fives, if such he had known. Most like a shipwrecked man who heaps his single platter with God's cheese and scarlet berries, or like any man who loves but one, and so gives all at once because he has it rather than because he counts it worthy. Thus my father gave, and thus, as did the woven formerly by young Achilles when they pined the veil across the boy's audacious front, and swept with the tuneful laughs the silver-fretted rocks, and wrapped his little daughter in a large men's doublet, careless did it fit or no. But after I had read for memory, I read for hope. The path my father's foot had trod me out, but which suddenly broke off. What time he dropped the wallet of the flesh and passed all alone, carried on, and set my child heart against the thorny underwood, to reach the grassy shelter of the trees, and bathe the wood without a brother babe. My own self-pity, like the red-breast bird, flies back to cover all that passed with leaves. Sublimest danger, over which none weeps, when any young wayfaring soul goes forth alone, unconscious of the perilous road, the day sun dazzling in his limpid eyes, to trust his own way, he an alien through the worlds of the books. And you think it fine, you clap hands, a fair day, you cheer him on, as if the worst could happen, were to rest but long beside a fountain, and yet behold, the world of books is still the world, and the worldlings in it are the less merciful and more resigned. For the weak there are winged like angel. Every knife that strives is as from elemental fire to assail a spiritual life. The beautiful seems right by force of beauty, and the feeble wrong because of the weakness. Power is justified. Though armed against St. Michael, many a crown covers bald foreheads. In the book world true, there is no lack neither of gods, saints, and kings. The shake the ashes and the grave aside from their calm locks, and undiscomforted look steadfast truth against the times changing mass. True, many a prophet teaches in the roads. True, many a sheer pulls down the flaming heavens upon his own head in the strong martyrdom in order to light men at moment's space. But stay, who judges, who distinguishes twixt soul and nice Messiahs justly at first sight, and leaves King Saul precisely at the same to serve King David, who discerns at once the sound of the trumpets when the trumpets blow for Alaric as well as Charlemagne, who judges prophets and can tell true shears from conjures. The child there, would you leave and push it his innocent smile against the guns, or even in the catacombs his torch grown raised in fluttering airs, and all the darker a muter round up not a child. I'd read books bad and good, some bad and good at once. Good aims not always make good books, and well-tempered spades turn up ill-smelling soils in dinging vineyards. Even books that prove God's being so indefinitely that man's doubt grows self-defined on the other side of the line, made atheist by suggestion. Moral books exasperating to license, genial books discounting from the human dignity, and merry books which set you weeping when the sun shines, and melancholy books which make you laugh that anyone should weep is in this disjointed life for one wrong more. The world of book is still the world I write, and both worlds have God's providence, thank God, to keep the hearthen with some struggle indeed among the breakers, some hard swimming through the deeps. I lost best in my soul sometimes and cried, God save me if there is any God. But even so, God save me, and being dashed from error to error every turn, still bore me nearer to the central truth. I thought so. All this anguish in the thick of men's opinions, press and counterpress, now up, now down, now underfoot, and now emergent, all the best of it perhaps, but throws you back upon the noble truth, and use of your own instinct merely proves pure reason stronger than the bare inference. At strongest, try it fixed against heaven's walls, your scaling ladders of high logic mount step by step. Sight goes faster, and still ray strikes out for you. How you cannot tell, and why you know it, you know not. Did you eliminate that such as you indeed should analyze, go straight and fast as light and high as God. The Kignet finds the water, but the man is born in ignorance of his element and feels out blind at first, disorganized by sin, the blood, his spirit inside dulled and crossed by his sensation. Presently we feel in the quicken, in the dark sometimes, then mark, we reverent, be obedient, for those dumb motions of imperfect life are oracles of vital deity, attesting the hereafter. Let who says the soul's clean white paper rather say a pamphlet, a prophet hollow holograph defiled and raised, covered by a monks, the apocalypse by the longest, pouring on which obscene text we may discern perhaps some fair, fine trace of what was written once upstroke of an alpha and omega expressing the old scripture, books, books, books. I found the secret of the garret room piled high with piled high with its cases in my father's name, piled high, packed large, were creeping in and out among the giant fossils of the past, like some small nimble mouse between the ribs of a mastodon. I nibbed here and there of this or that box, pulling through the gap in heats of terror, haste, victorious joy. The first book first, and how I felt it beat under my pillow in morning. It's dark, and an hour before the sun would let me read my books at last, because the time was ripe, I chanced upon the poet as the earth plunges in fury when the internal fires have reached and pricked her heart, and throwing flat the mouths and the temples, the triumphal gates and the towers of observation, clears herself to elemental freedom. Thus my soul, at poetry's divine first finger touch, let go conventions and sprang up surprised, convicted of the great eternities before two worlds. What's this, Aurora Leigh? You write so of the poets, and not enough. Those virtuous liar, dreamer after dark, exaggerators of the sun and the moon, and soothsayers in the teacup. I write so of the only truth tellers, now left to God, the only speakers of the essential truth, opposed to relative, comparative, and temporal truths, the only holders by his skin skirts through the conventional grey glooms, the only teachers who'd instruct mankind for just a shadow of a charnel wall to find a man's veritable stature out, erect, sublime, the measure of a man, and that's the measure of an angel, says the apostle. And the while your common men build pyramids, gauge railroads, rain, reap, dine, and dust the flaunty carpets of the world for kings to walk on, or our senators, the poet suddenly will catch them up with his voice like a thunder. This is the soul, this is the life, this word is being said in heaven. Here's God's down on us. What are you about? How all those workers start amid their work. Look round, look up, and feel moment's space. The carpet dusting through the pretty trade is not imperative labor after all. My own best boys, am I only with you? That thus I love you, or but one through love, does all this smell of rhyme about my feet conclude my visit to your holy hill in personal presence, or but testify the rustling of your vesture through my dreams with influent odors, when my joy and pain, my thought and aspiration, like the stop of the pipe or flute, are absolutely dumb, if not melodious, do you play on me, my pipers, and if sooth you did not blow, would not sound like, or is the music mine, as the man's voice or the breath is called his own, in breathed by the life breather? And there is a doubt for the cloudy season. But the sun was high when first I felt my pulses set themselves for concord, when the rhythmic turbulence of blood and brain swept outward upon words, as when upon the elders, blanching them by turning upon their under nature still, they trembled in dilation or delight and triumph of the poet, who would say a man's mere yes, a woman's common no, a little human hop of that, of this, or this, and says the word so that it burns you through with a special revelation, shakes the heart of all the men and the women in the world, as if one come from the dead and spoke with eyes too happy, a familiar thing become divine in the utterance, while for him, the poet, the speaker, he expends the joy, the palpitating engine in his flesh thrills inly with concentrating fellowship to those innumerable spirits who sun themselves outside of time. O life, O poetry, which means life and life, cognizant of life beyond this blood, beat passionate for truth beyond these senses, poetry, my life, my eagle, both grappling, feet still not hot from Zeus' thunder, who has ravished me away from the shepherds, sheep, and dogs, and set me in the Olympian roar and round of Olympus faces for a cup bearer to keep the mouths of all the godheads moist for the everlasting laughters. I myself half drunk across the beaker with the eyes how those gods look. Enough so, Ganymede. We shall not bear above around above a round or two, we drop the golden cup at her foot and swoon back to the earth and find ourselves face down among the pine cones, cold and dew, while the dogs bark and many shepherds scoffs. Words come now to the youth. Such ups and downs have poets. Am I indeed? Am I such indeed? The name is royal, and to sign it like a queen is what I dare not, though some royal blood would seem to tingle in me now and then with sense of power and ache with imposthumes and manias usual to the race. Howbeit, I dare not. Tis easy to go mad and ape a bourbon in a crown of straws. The things too common, my fervent souls strive rhyme on rhyme, whose would strike steel on steel is steel had offered in a restless heat of doing something. Many tender souls have strung their losses on a rhyming thread. As children cowslips, the more pains they take, the work more withers. The young men, and the maids too often sow their wild oats in the tame woods before they sit down under their own wine, live for use. Alas, near all the birds will swing at dawn, and yet we do not take the shivering shallow for the holy lark. In those days, though I never analyzed myself, all analysis came late. You catch a sight of nature earliest in full front sun face, and your eyelids wink and the drop before the wonder of it. You miss the form through seeing the light. I lived those days and wrote because I lived unlicensed else. My heart beat in my brain, life's violent flood abolished bounds, which my neighbors feel, which mine, who, what mattered. It is so in youth. We play at leaf frog over the god term, and the love within us and the love without are mixed, confounded. If we were loved or love, we scarcely distinguish. So the other power being acted on and acting seem the same. In the first unrush of life chariot's wheels, we know not of if the forest move or we. And so, like most young poets in a flush of individual life, I poured myself along the veins of others and achieved mere lifeless imitations of life words and made the living answer for the dead, profaning nature. Touch not, do not touch, nor handle. We are too legal who write young. We beat the forminics till we hurt our thumbs, as if still ignorant of the counterpoint. We shall We call the muse, or muse, benignant muse, as if we had seen her purple braided head with the eyes in it start the pause as often as staged. What makes believe with so much earnest, what effete results, what virile efforts, what cold wire drawn odds from such white heads, bucolics, where the cows would scare the writer if they had splashed the mud in lashing off the flies, didacts driven against the heels of what the master said, and the counterfeiting apex shrill with trumps trumps a babe might blow between two straining cheeks of babbled roars to make his mother's laugh and elegiac griefs, the songs of love, like cast of nosegays picked up on the road, the worst of for being warm. All these things writ on happy mornings like a morning heart. The leaps for love is active for resolve, weak for art only. Of the ancient form will thrill indeed in carrying the young blood. The wineskins now and then, little rape warped, will crack even as the new wine gurgles in, and spare the old bottle, spill not the new wine. By Keats' soul, the man who never stepped in gradual progress like another man, but turning grandly on his central self, unshepherded himself in a 20 perfect years and died not young, the life of a life distilled to a mere drop, falling like a tear upon the world's cold cheek to make it burn forever. By that strong expected soul, I count it strange and hard to understand that nearly all the young poets should write old, that Pope was a sexagenarian at 16 and beardless Parian, academical, and so with others. It may be, perhaps, such have not settled long and deep enough in Terence to attain the clairvoyance of still, and the memory mixes with the vision, spoils and work it turbid. Or perhaps again, in order to discover the muse and sphinx, the melancholy desert must sweep round behind you as before. For me, I wrote false poems like the rest, and thought them true because myself was true in writing them. I pre-adventure have writ true ones since with less complacence. But by I could not hide my quickening inner life from those at watch. They saw a light at window now and then. They had not sat there who had set it there. My father's sister started when she caught my soul agaze in the eyes. She could not say I had no business with the sort of soul, but plainly she objected and demurred the souls of the dangerous things to carry straight through all the split saltpeter of the world. She said sometimes, Aurora, have you done your task this morning? Have you read that book? And are you ready for the crochet hair? As if she said, I know there's something wrong. I know I have not ground you down enough to flatten and bake you to wholesome crust, to the household uses and properties, before the rain had got into my barn and set the grains sprouting what you are green without door impudence. You almost grow, to which I answered, would she hear my task and verify my abstract of the book? Should I sit down to the croissant walk, which such was such her pleasure? Then I sat, teased the patient needle till it split the thread which oozed from it meandering lace, meandering lace from hour to hour. I was not therefore sad. My soul was singing at work apart behind the wall of senses, as safe from harm as sings the lark when sucked up from out of the sight in vortices of the glory and blue air. And so through forced work and spontaneous work, the inner life informed the outer life, reduced the irregular blood to settle rhythms, made cool the forehead with flesh sprinkling dreams, and rounding to the spheric soul, the pine body struck a color up the cheeks through somewhat faint. I clenched my bars across my blue eyes, greeting in the looking glass, and said, we will live, Aurora, we will be strong. The dogs are on us, but we will not die. Whoever lives true life will love true love. I learned to love that England very oft before the day was born, or otherwise through secret winding of the afternoon. I threw my hunters off and plunged myself among the details as a hunted stag will take the water, shivering with the fear and passion of the cause. And when at last escaped so many a green slope built on a slope betwixt me and enemy's house behind, I dared to rest or wander like a rest, made sweeter for the step upon the grass, and view the ground most gentle deployment, as if the gods finer touched but did not press in making England such an up and down of winter, nothing too much up for and down a ripple of land, such little hills the sky can stoop or tenderly, and the wheat fields climb such nooks of valley lined with orchard fed full of noises by invisible stream and open pastures where you scarcely tell white daisies from white dew at intervals, the mythic oaks and the elm trees standing out self-poised upon their prodigy facade. I thought my fatherland was worthy too of being my Shakespeare's very oft alone, unlicensed, not unfrequently with leave to the third, with Romney and his friends, the rising painter Vincent Carrington, whom men judge hardly as be bonneted, because he holds that paint a body well, you paint a soul by implication, like the first master. Pleasant walks, for if, he said, when I was last in Italy, it sounded as an instrument that played too far off for the tune, and it is a fine to listen. Often we walked only two. If cousin Romney pleased to walk with me, we read or talked or quarrelled as it chanced. We were not lovers, nor even friends well matched, say rather scholars upon different tracks, and thinkers disagreed, he overfull of what is, and I happily overbold for what might be. But then the thrushes sang and shook my pulses, and the elms new leaves, and I turned and held my finger up and bade him mark that whoever the world went ill, as he related, certainly the thrushes still sang in it, at which word his brow would soften. He bore with me in melancholy patience, not unkind, while breaking into the voluble asceticism. I flattered all the beauteous country round, as poets use the skies, the clouds, the fields, the happy violets hiding from the rods, the primroses run down to carrying gold, the tangled hedgerows where the cows push out the impatient horns, in the tolerant churning mouths, twixt dripping ash boughs, hedgerows all alive with birds and gnats and a large white butterfly, which look as if the Mayflower had sought life and palpitated forth upon the wind. Hills, vales, woods netted in a silver mist, farms, granges doubled up among the hills, and cattle grazing in the watered valleys, and cottage chimneys smoking from the wood, and cottage gardens smelling everywhere, confused with smell of orchard. See, I said, and see, is is God not with us on earth? And shall we put him down by aught we do? Who says there is nothing for the poor and the vile, save poverty and wickedness? Behold, an ankle deep in English grass I leap, and clapped my hands, and called all very fair. In the beginning, when God called all good, even then was evil near us. It is writ. But we indeed who call things good and fair, the evil is upon us while we speak. Deliver us from evil. Let us pray.